Okay. Good morning, guys, and thank you, Thomas. Super excited to be kicking off the first session of the day. I hope all of you guys can see we've worked hard to put together an incredible panel to take a small glimpse into the future. Okay, I think we're going to do our best to look a little bit into the crystal ball so that all of you guys can walk away really with some actionable insights for 2023 and beyond. I know I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record. Thomas mentioned Slido.com. Again, this is Flow event number 6, and we get feedback, a ton of feedback after every event, and everyone comments that actually the interactions from the crowd with our panelists is by far one of the most important things. So I would just, again, highly recommend let's get your questions up in Slido, and we can have some great conversations in the Q&A after we finish. So, with that, I would love to just do a brief round of intros. So yeah, maybe we can start off with Lou, if you'd like to just do a quick intro, please.
Yep, sure. Hi, everyone. I have been working in content production now for over 20 years, both on the creative side as an art director, but also on the production side as well, shoot producer, etc. Covering multi-channel as well as e-commerce, and actually the last 7 years, as Thomas mentioned, I've worked for studios within Zalando, Net-a-Porter and Essence, all operating very large-scale, high-volume production studios. So yeah, so I'm glad to be here today.
Thank you. Julia?
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia, as you can see. I've been a creative producer for 8 years now. I started from Diesel. I'm not sure if you know it, but actually everybody thinks that it's an American brand, but it's actually Italian from my hometown. So I started there as an e-com producer, and I started moving into more editorial and advertising production. Then I moved to Fendi as a global video producer, so I was managing the basically video and image advertising campaigns, and currently at Amazon as production manager for Europe.
Great.
And I'm Jennie. Nice to be here. So I work for John Lewis, as said. I'm always really conscious that I don't have this like string of brands that I've worked for previously and jumped with different experiences. But I've been with the John Lewis creative side for about 10 years, been with the partnership for 22, but actually have seen within that time 3 different relocations of the studio, a lot of change. We've done things in-house, we've sent stuff to third party, we've done things on pen and paper, we've done things on spreadsheets, we've offshored, we've retouched in-house, we've done a whole heap of stuff over those 10 years. So 10 years ago, I wouldn't have known what the future was, so it's really exciting to be able to reflect on that and actually think what the future's going to bring as well. So good discussion this morning.
Thank you. So yeah, I guess let's dive in. I think I would like to start with trends, maybe some real trends. So Louise, maybe you can tell us a little bit about a real trend that you're seeing today in the market. And then on the flip side, also would like to just identify some fads maybe that are here and maybe not are going to stick around too long. So
yeah, I think this is an interesting one when it comes to trends. I'm going to say video, and I think maybe that's a surprise to some of you, but actually, video has been around for a long time, but very few people are using it. And it brings such added value to product imagery and actually the whole experience. And through the pandemic, I think everybody has seen that the e-commerce brands that have been functioning for a long time had been doing video, some well, some not so well, but actually all the bricks and mortar stores and other companies that hadn't really focused on their website have realized that they've got to now get in the game and compete with these e-commerce brands. And so I would definitely say that video is something that, from a product point of view, really is a trend, but actually now just the whole moving image across the entire website. So there's different ways of using video, how-to videos, showing how something functions, actually being able to utilize that medium. So even though it's not a new trend, I think actually it's becoming a trend now that's becoming mass rather than just a few kind of like independence.
Great.
So that's what I would say is really a key takeaway for that.
I'd love, also interesting hearing that from you. I know you're part of the Net-a-Porter team that
Right.
actually was really, I think, really did a major push in video years ago, but now we're seeing that come to the masses.
Yeah,
so pretty interesting.
absolutely.
How about fads?
We were talking about this earlier, and I think the whole world of Web3 and the metaverse and this whole fantasy land, is it a fad or not? I don't know. I just think from my perspective, it's something that we should be looking at. I don't think it's going to happen. So if we're talking about future in 2023, actually reaching to everybody, but there are big players out there that are trying it and seeing what happens. And I think over the next few years, that's going to start to bubble. I think it will disappear and then come back in a different iteration and different ways of doing it. But I think, I'm not an expert, so please don't ask me lots of questions about Web3 and that. But I think just knowing that it's there and being able to see that that's the way the world is going, that the generations are shopping differently and looking at content differently, I think we should be keeping an eye on it. And it'll be interesting to see whether it is a fad or whether it actually does turn into something that is more like reality.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that one. I'm sure we'll get some good questions on that one as well.
Yeah, just no
there's a lot of
technical
interest.
stuff.
But just to pause for a second, because you touched on scalable video. I want to flip that to the crowd. Can we just get a show of hands quickly? Like who's either producing video at scale or contemplating moving into video at scale? Because that's something that we're obviously hearing day in, day out. So a lot of hands going up. Pretty cool. Okay, awesome. Julia, how about you? Trends?
I would say definitely automation. As we said, for video, it's something that's been out for quite some time now, but I have the feeling that it hasn't been explored yet when it comes to production. It's something that's been started, being applied to like photography or video making and so on, but what about production, right? I'm sure there are like many producers in the audience today. When it comes to like pre-production, post-production, if you think about how many rounds of emails you have to go through just to get something approved, right? I would love to have a tool to completely replace that. And same as like the exports, like there are some fixed export when it comes to the, Facebook ads, YouTube ads. It would be just super useful to have something, ready and replacing like hours of time because obviously we are sort of the bridge between, the art direction and like the technical parts, so the post-production team. So I would love to have that. Full disclosure, I'm not an expert, but I would love to actually even, hearing from you what are the best options in this sense. Yeah.
Great. And any fads that are?
It might sound weird, but actually automation too, because I think that on one side it could be a great tool. On the other side, we have, I think, to be super careful, not kind of thinking about automation as a sort of expertise, like a sort of something that replaces a specific job or a specific expertise, right? I'm thinking about, graphic designing or post-production. I'm very, very much protective when it comes to expertises and roles. I'm sure some of you might have had the experience of saying, or actually someone telling you, okay, what about hair and makeup? Let's just have the models, applying hair and makeup by themselves. And I'm like, oh, wait. So yeah, I would say it's a great tool, it just needs to be handled properly. That's how I feel about that.
Great, thank you.
I hope it makes sense.
Yeah? Jennie?
Okay, well, I was going to say how great it is that everyone's got things in common. What's not so great is when you're third on a panel and the people before you say the things that you were going to say, because we've all got things in common. But yeah, like totally agree with that. I guess I totally agree in terms of video, moving image, automation, anything. The trend that's not going away is the expectation to do more with less and always being pressed to do more, deliver more, how are we going to do that? What is it that we have to go and explore? And I guess, like I previously said, having kind of redesigned a studio 3 times, it's always thinking about what does the space need to do for us? What does the space need to deliver for us? It's all very well talking about the technology and the equipment for kind of moving image and video, but actually, are we ready for that? Are we ready to be able to take these shoots into our space? Where do we go? Have we got the talent? So that whole trend of doing more, delivering more at pace, at speed, scalability, really for me, what I've seen and what's going to continue is that that's not going to go away, and that's probably a trend that we're all going to see. And with that, going on to fads, because I know that's what you're next going to ask me, because I've seen you do it before, is that with that comes a lot of new stuff that sounds really interesting and sounds like that's going to be the answer to all your prayers and sounds like that's going to be great, but will it last? Investment is a really difficult thing to kind of manage at the moment in terms of where do we put our money and what do we spend it on, and not having something that's not gonna last is kind of going to be the biggest mistake at the moment. So being a little bit cautious, but making sure that things are going to be able to deliver for the long term, and it's not something where we've sort of dabbled with a bit of CGI and then they want to go back to shooting from sample, and it all gets a little bit sort of difficult. So yeah, just I guess making sure that we don't get wrapped up into these new ideas that then aren't gonna last.
Thanks. So let's move on to challenges. I think there's we mentioned it here. I think a lot of us share. There's a lot of probably when we start talking and you guys meet one another, you'll see that there are a lot of shared challenges. But when we look into the future, Louise, what kind of challenges can we be expecting here?
I mean, there's probably lots on the production side and within the land of producing content, but I think as the world starts to change and customers are shopping more on e-commerce, the challenge with returns and where the studio and how we help and support that return aspect is something that is going to come, I think, heavier and heavier down on the studio production area. Of course, video can help with returns. I did, while working at Zalando as a tech company, they did lots of A/B testing, and there's a lot of proof to say that actually video on certain products can reduce the return rate and quite significantly. But that's not the only answer. I think shopping behaviour still is the same. I think 20 years ago, dresses were returning at 70%, and now, 20 years later, they're still returning at 70%. And I think that's women's shopping behaviour, and how are we ever going to change that? But at the same time, it is just so easy now to be able to order online, order as much as you want, and the idea that the studio could support that, whether it's in tooling with a size and fit tool, how you actually talk about the product in your copy, whether you're giving ideas about model size and things, but I don't think it's been nailed yet. I think there's still, the returns are too high. A lot of the companies that I've spoken to or worked at do have really high, especially maybe not so much in the premium sector, but in the more high street areas, then the returns rate can get really high, anywhere 50% plus all the time. So I think from a studio perspective, I would definitely say that is going to be a challenge, but not only just studio, the whole of the kind of like e-commerce world. I'm talking mainly from a fashion background. I don't know what the return kind of like aspect is when it comes to the home area, but that's something that a challenge I want to be able to be part of solving and being able to do. So that, yeah, I think returns is a big one.
Thank you. And Julia, how about you? Challenges from your perspective?
I would say return rate is definitely an interesting point. It's something that we are looking into a lot. We are also trying to use surveys as a tool to understand what might be wrong, right? Is it because, are you saying just it's a sort of behavioral thing, or is it because you don't see the product properly, like you're missing some details, you don't understand how to set it up? So definitely survey is something that could help understanding, how production should be tailored according to the customer need. And the other thing I would say, overall, like produce more with less. When it comes to production, there's more and more sort of requests to have a sort of frugal approach, right? Like how many times have been told, like, okay, what about shooting with the iPhone, right? It's the same. No, it's not the same. Obviously, it's not the case. Amazon, we're not using iPhones. But overall, it's a sort of understanding how to deal with still the same amount of deliverables, because at the end of the day, the customer want to see more and more within a very, very short timing, but with less money or overall less resources. I would say that's the biggest challenge, yeah.
Okay. Jennie, how about you?
Oh, it's so hard to pick one, isn't it? There's so many. I guess reflecting on kind of the earlier conversations about what's going to be sticking around and the trends and stuff, actually talent, finding talent in maybe new fields and new areas that we're going into. I think we've all got kind of great talent pools for kind of what we do as a BAU and what we do in the day job, but actually starting to think that the studio in kind of 12, 18 months might be doing different types of content. And one of the things certainly that we're doing is reaching out to other content teams outside of ecom within the company and kind of using the studio as a base where they can bring teams in and that we can deliver other content for kind of other teams internally, but actually building that pool and finding those people that are in that kind of world that are already ahead of the game with what may or may not be a fad, with automation technology, but making sure that we're kind of ready for that. So knowing the right places to look and knowing the right sort of places to talk to. And I guess the challenge with, you've said it and I totally agree, sort of doing more with less is making sure that there's sort of systems involved and workflow tools and everything else that you kind of need to be able to scale and be able to deliver all of that. Particularly if you're in a company where there's kind of challenges with onboarding new people and kind of doing that, opening some new avenues. But just making sure that we've got a workflow tool and we've got the talent, because ultimately, otherwise we're not going to be able to deliver very much and not be able to do what is being asked of us. So they're coming at it from a slightly different angle.
Yeah. And I think extremely relevant just with so much uncertainty in the market that you guys have the talent in place. And also it sounds like there's a lot of versatility that you guys are building into the studio. So you can, hey, if we don't know what kind of content format is coming in 6 months, you guys can pivot and actually quickly do that.
We're having to design for everything. So if you don't know, John Lewis is a department store, so we've got both home and fashion. So we could go from sort of building interior kind of houses and having those lifestyles. And the other side of the studio, we've kind of got the model sets and the fashion kind of fast flowing in and out. There's talk of broadcast, there's talk of live streams. So we're just looking at the moment at installing a kind of soundproof area of the studio. So if people, at the moment when they do it out of hours because it's fairly open plan and fairly noisy. And then obviously from a post-production point of view, looking at video, what's required kind of with video coming through, but making sure that the space is there for any type of content that may need, whether you want to build a 2-story house sort of, and we open it up and you have the whole space, or it's divided out with sort of private areas. So it's staying flexible without really knowing what's going to come.
Got it. Great. Well, let's switch gears a little bit, and we can touch on some opportunities for everybody in 2023 and beyond. I think specifically, if we can maybe touch on like some underutilized areas or assets kind of that people could potentially be doubling down on. Things that are, that we should be on the lookout for. So, Lou?
I think that there's a huge opportunity because content is king and customers are wanting more and more content. The fact that the majority of us are working in studios with extremely talented people, And maybe depending on how the company you work, whether it's seasonal, if you're working with stock, you've got peaks and troughs in terms of production times, or even if you're working with samples, you've got more time to shoot. The actually utilizing that studio and getting as much return on investment as what you can do is something that is a huge opportunity for everybody. We did it at Zalando, and as an experience, as a test to see whether we could utilize the skill of the production team who were also then creative, but were they able to then produce other types of content and being able to not only do imagery for social media, for the press team, for emails, up to the point that with Zalando we were ending up doing banners and utilizing the speed that we delivered on e-commerce, actually transferring those sort of timelines, well, maybe not as short, but the idea of being able to utilize those skills that had been practiced day in, day out, because time to online was so quick. And so there's huge advantages to that as well, because what we found is that, especially with marketing, the material, the content that they do, and this is just a specific at Zalando's, is that they had a lead time of maybe 4 months to be able to deliver maybe 60 images for the Zalando website that was seasonal. And they'd go off on a shoot and maybe spend 250,000 euros on that and come back with those 60 images that needed to be used again and again and again. And I think from a platform perspective, and certainly now what we're seeing with brands, is because everybody's hungry for so much more content, that was never going to suffice. And so being able to utilize the teams within the studio not only delivered the marketing team a lot more content that they could change regularly. So actually we got to the point where we were providing maybe 10 to 15 different images a week so that we could change it on all different categories. And Instagram as well. So wherever we could, utilizing the model sets, maybe changing a background on the set next door and doing some additional imagery, really helps the company and the customers in a huge amount of ways. And I would say that from a benefit of a studio, it's great for the teams, because not only do they then work from working on set where they're learning their craft, but actually there's an opportunity to then start going into other areas where they can maybe start to deal in a bit more editorial, and be able to experiment a bit more. And during those low times, they could do testing, which is much, they've got different skill sets that they can use. So that really does help with retention for the staff, but also just keep them excited. As we all know, studio production can be seen as a machine sometimes, and trying to keep creatives in your company is extremely hard. So I think there's a huge benefit then from a staff point of view, a development and a conversation with actually retention of staff. But also from a customer point of view, their brand identity is now much stronger, because it's one story, it's one voice, it's one team telling it. And as we become brands are becoming more omni-channel. They're thinking about, not only having their stories being told on the website, but actually you're seeing e-commerce companies actually now wanting to go to bricks and mortar, whereas bricks and mortar were going towards e-commerce. So actually thinking from the very beginning, when you're creating that content, where else could it go? How much more can we use out of that image, and edits of that image to be able to continue to change to keep the customer engaged and interested, because otherwise they're just going to be going off to the next one. Customers' behavior again has changed. So I spoke a bit about this. I did the talk in New York, and of course there's a lot more that goes into it. You've got to have the right workflow tools. You've got to have the right people in the right places. It doesn't all come easy. So if anybody is interested in me talking further, then I'll happily deep dive on that. But for now, I think that would be something I would
Love
say.
it. Thank you. Julia, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Louise, most of all when it comes to the scalability point, right? I think it could definitely help sort of anticipating the needs, like most of all when it comes to editorial, as you were saying, right? We don't necessarily have to wait for, a specific brief. We already know on some specific products that the customer wants to see more, right? Wants to see something more creative than the standard detail page type of content. So I would definitely say scalability is something we should look at. I wouldn't including advertising, and because I think they're two different things, because most of when I was working at Diesel, it was pretty much about the message that we wanted to convey to the customer. It wasn't necessarily about the product, it was more about the message, and that's something that it's kind of tricky to scale. But when it comes to more standardized type of production or editorial production, it's something that could definitely be looked at, yeah.
Okay. And Jennie, how about you? Opportunities, 2023 and beyond.
I'm going with sustainability, but I know that there's going to be there's a segment on that this afternoon, which I'm exceptionally excited to listen to. But I'm just, again, it's kind of a personal reflection. I'm sure that there's a lot of people that have got things that happen in their studio that happen that way because they've always happened that way, and everybody knows that they happen that way. And if you're the one that comes up and says we want to do something different, people kind of go a little bit crazy. But what I would say is that actually there are some things in there where with these opportunities, like with sustainability, we can absolutely kind of pick out and use as a way kind of to be able to support us. So just for example, one of our things is that actually all of our samples get delivered into another warehouse, and then we have to wait for them all to come from that warehouse into the studio and be shot. So we've always battled with it. It kind of, we're trying to talk about doing things quicker. We're trying to talk about doing things faster. Nobody wants to kind of change the way because it would be too complicated and too difficult. But actually, to be able to talk about scalability and to be able to talk about why are we putting so many vehicles on the road to transport stuff from one building to another building, now in this day and age, what an opportunity to be able to kind of make that change and make that difference. And now people start to listen. And they say, oh, yeah, maybe do you have the space for all of these samples to come direct in? Yes, absolutely, we'll make it. So being able to kind of look at where we've got these things that just don't quite work for us or things that we'd like to change, and actually the fact that things like sustainability, in whichever way you apply that to your operation, because obviously that can be applied to so many different elements within the end-to-end, but being able to kind of knuckle down on those, it will reap benefits then in other areas, because actually you then increase speed, I get things shot quicker, and then ultimately, going back to what I originally sort of said with doing more with less, you're able to do that by sort of just unpicking things that have kind of have always been a bit of a challenge. So that's where I'm going.
Okay. Well, I think coming to the end of this session, but I think there's definitely some, we've heard some themes, common themes among the three of you today. I think what you just said, Jennie, right? That do more than less, but probably creative automation that is enabling you to do more than less, definitely front and center, it sounds like, for the three of you. Scalable video workflows, and I think actually both of you, Lou and Jennie, you guys touched on kind of building versatility or agility into your studio spaces. I think it's super interesting, right? And to be able to adapt those teams, not only from an employee perspective, so like let's build up those skills, let's empower our employees to try new things, but then also in the actual set space itself, you guys can build a two-story house or a live shopping set or whatever that is, right, on the fly. I think it's super interesting. So, well, just to finish, we're going to end by, I would like to get one word or two from each of you guys just to describe how you're feeling for 2023 from a professional perspective. So, Louise?
I'm going to say optimistic, but also I'm excited. So,
Thank you.
those two words. Both positive.
Yeah.
Wow, 2 words. I would say the same. I mean, we all know that it's a challenging moment, right? But I always think also that creativity sort of never dies. So I see it's sort of a challenge, right? What's come next? That's how we see it.
Okay. And Jennie?
I'm going for I'm certain that they're uncertain.
Okay.
I'm certainly uncertain about the future.
Good one.
Okay. Well, awesome. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you. So we're going to jump into some Q&A. remember, please pull up Slido so we can jump in here. And we have a lot of questions in here, so thank you guys for that. Let's see, we're going to start at the top, and people are upvoting these. So does video have cost implications for anything that needs post-production requirements? More cleanup beforehand or creative operator fixing later?
Yes and no. I suppose it depends on your production setup. I think from a cost point of view, of course, it's an investment because it's going to take time out of your shooting because you need to have the model walk from one set to another. Maybe over time your set can do both, and with technology now the way it is, it definitely does. But when it comes to video, certainly with what I've worked with on my teams is that we try and do everything we can so there's as little touch-up as possible. I think the color aspect and actually making sure that the color is correct across the video and then the photo set, that I think is probably the biggest area and challenge when it comes to having video. Other than that, the idea, keeping the set clean, making sure that they're not wearing shoes, things that are really simple that won't take up the time of the editors so that then they can actually do it. But like I said, it's not a rollout for all. I think it is definitely something that you need to specifically look at which area you want to invest this time and money in, because it does invest time and money. You do have to take that into consideration when you're in a fast-paced environment. I think if you're working with samples, then that allows you to give a bit more time, and then maybe then the photo editors can then go in and do a bit more work on the video. But the idea always with the mass productions that I've been doing is that it shouldn't take time, it should get done, so we try and get as much quality on the set, so then when it comes to any kind of like tidying up, it's more about the color accuracy, because there will be difference between the light.
And we're going to take, okay, it's getting bumped down here. So I'm actually going to take this because I think I'm very interested to hear the answer. So doing more with less. And we actually heard about CGI being implemented and then maybe being pulled out. But it's a recurring theme. And could CGI be a solution to help with doing more with less?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it all comes into where we've all got one budget and where you want to invest it. I think there's huge opportunities there with CGI. It all depends on your systems and how your network's running and whether you're actually being able to sustain it. And I think it's similar to the Web3 and the metaverse, even though that's a lot further ahead. I think it just takes a few other brands and other companies to be able to try things out, learn the pros and cons, learn what's going to work and what isn't, start to see whether cost efficiencies can be gained by using it, and A/B testing and trialing it. So I actually think it's going to happen, and it will eventually probably take over actually just having photography as a 2D perspective, and actually being able to utilize 3D, CGI, things like that, I think will become more and more expected, I suppose, from the customer point of view.
And I guess kind of it depends on where and how it's used. So with John Lewis, where we've got a lot of large furniture items, obviously it works really well. There's something that we do, which is any sofa, any shape, any fabric. Obviously for that, we don't get everything into the studio. So a lot of that, the fabric swatches are photographed, it's rendered, and then it's all CGI. But then going back to the sustainability piece, those samples do still arrive for the creative shoots. So it's again, you can use a method of production for kind of the PDP and for the e-com, because you've got a budget and you're doing it at pace and you've got a launch date and you've got to get the things online, you've got to sell. Once you get into the kind of inspirational content, the creative, and we're doing room settings, and similarly to you, we'll try and shoot at the same time with kind of things for print or things for the banners, things for kind of email landings. You're getting them in anyway. So where people are now sort of really like that image, and then they can see the difference between the studio shot and the CGI shot is kind of where those conversations, and it's normally the people that aren't working in the studio that have these opinions on things. So it's normally people that are looking on a screen that's not calibrated or something where they kind of have their views on how they do it. So I guess the operational and the creative world kind of coming together on what we can achieve, how much money are you prepared to put behind it and back it, and what level of quality are you happy to kind of go to or not go to for that cost, and where do you want to put your investment? For us, it's always that conversation between home and fashion. You know, if you want the money on the fashion shoots and the models and the creatives, and to deliver home, we have to slightly pare it back and go for a more automated, then that's what we have to do. But that's a decision sort of commercially that's made.
Okay.
Can I just add as well? I think we
sure.
had a really good, Jennie and I had a really good conversation last night as well about 3D, digital 3D, and actually the benefits of that. And when it comes to product photography, I can see we were talking about that when at Zalando, because they've got huge volumes of shoes that they sell, and being able to have a 3D digital image of a trainer, even like 2 or 3 years ago, it was just the quality wasn't there. The price was really high, and the quality was just not there. And actually, even in the last 2 or 3 years, has been a huge leap in the quality of those 3D product images that just go into the sustainability aspect. If you're just only having a website that's just got product images, then actually that could be a really great way of being able to, once it starts to really get into the market and the price starts to come down, actually be able to utilize it. I think those areas are probably going to be really beneficial to the fashion side. But like you say, CGI, when it comes to the home and interior stuff, is a winner.
Okay, well, thank you. We're going to move from tech to the human side of things. I know, Jennie, you mentioned talent and keeping talent as a challenge, actually. And so this question, just any advice for keeping creatives engaged by the influx of doing more with less?
Yeah, there is some. So we've gone through quite a radical change, and obviously in terms of who's in the room, I don't know how many of your studios are run with employed or a bit of a mix of freelancers and kind of staff. We've had both. So we were a fully internal team. We had employed photographers, stylists, hair and makeup, studio assistants. There was a really, really great kind of succession. You know, every studio assistant wanted to be a photographer, and because they were employed, we were able to help them build their portfolios. Ultimately, being an e-com studio, you do lose talent. They always want to go on and do other things, and you know, that's kind of a great thing and a not so great thing when you lose talent, but good for them. And then, obviously, with what everyone's gone through over the last few years, we've restructured. We're pretty much fully freelance now. Puts a huge amount of pressure on the very, very small team that we've got left. But it has had to make us change how we kind of view the talent that comes in. We have a lot of kind of repeat bookings. We bring them into our team. We include them in kind of conversations and stuff. And where we're able to kind of utilize the space and really try and bring in different shoots, our team that are employed are actually able to do and experience other things, either through the exposure of working with the freelancers and the talent that we get in, but actually by being able to go and produce different shoots because we're opening up the studio and because we're making the most of the space. So so John Lewis also owns a supermarket. We've got Waitrose. So we will use our space, and Waitrose will come in and do a shoot. And for us to be able to say we can put a producer on that, you know, for them, it makes a change from their day job, and they feel that they can stay kind of that little bit longer. But actually, the environment and having the studio is a great place that freelancers do want to come and work when we're optioning and we're booking people, that we make that space inviting for them, and that they feel that they can have kind of got a say in it. So it's just remembering that everybody's kind of people and they've all got great talents, and being able to merge the kind of the team and the freelancers, because you need everyone to work, right? So you need absolutely everyone to do their role and to deliver. Going back to doing more with less, you know, we don't want disgruntled teams. That's kind of where all the focus should be. So yeah, that's kind of how we've approached it.
Yeah, I agree. We also have that kind of mix of internal creative roles and external talents, and I think it's nice when you can empower, creative roles to actually propose something instead of just going, to them. Here's the brief. Thanks for delivering. It's more, okay. What would you like to do? What do you think it's the best proposal, like according to what we want to, deliver to the customer. And obviously you have to have, a sort of mix that makes sense, a balance between internal talents and freelancers. Most of all, when it comes to like editorials, it's also nice to work obviously with freelancers. You need different creative minds and so on. But I like the fact that we can actually empower, internal creative roles. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Can I just add, I just want to say just very quickly, Net-a-Porter used to have a really fun thing that once a month they would open up the studio between the end of the day and 9 o'clock to allow the teams to be able to use the equipment and do their own creative shoots.
Nice.
So from a cost point of view, it didn't really cost anybody anything apart from maybe a couple of managers staying behind to do it, but they could use the samples from the sample room. The models would stay behind on their own because they would get some extra shots for their book. So I think things like that really do help retain staff. Of course, when they're just in the daily grind of their day-to-day, we are hiring creative people. You need to let them have that outlet. So, I think that's really just a quick and cheap and easy thing, but it's great. And we'd have little exhibitions at the end of each month to show the work to the rest of the company.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thank you. Let's give a round of applause to our amazing panel. Thank you, guys.